Let's trace how so much of the instability we see across the Middle East today can be tracked back to a single claim, one sentence spoken over 2 decades ago. We're going to see how that one justification for war kicked off a chain reaction that honestly completely redrew the map of the world.
And here it is. This was the sentence at the heart of it all. Our source material for this explainer calls it the lie that greenlit the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This one statement became the official reason the United States and its allies were about to go to war. Okay, so let's get into it. In the shadow of 9/11, the Bush administration was pushing this new idea of preemptive strikes against countries they said sponsored terror. Iraq was put at the top of the list, but, they needed a really good reason to sell it to the rest of the world.
So, to build that case for war, the administration rolled out what they called a mountain of intelligence. They had CIA analysis, they had reports from Britain's MI6, they had testimony from people who had defected from Iraq, and they even had these documents that supposedly showed Saddam was trying to buy uranium from Niger. The problem, as we'd all find out later, this evidence was a house of cards. It was flawed, sometimes totally fabricated, or based on analysis that was just warped by a ton of political pressure.
Now, this is where it gets really wild. While the U.S. was making its case to the world, United Nations weapons inspectors were literally on the ground in Iraq searching. And their conclusion, which they reported again and again, was, hey, there's just no evidence of an active WMD program here. But that conclusion was totally ignored.
So in March of 2003, the invasion kicked off. And the war itself was fast. Within just 3 weeks, Baghdad had fallen, and Saddam Hussein's regime was gone. It looked like mission accomplished. But then came the search for the weapons.
And this is the moment. This is where the entire justification for the war just completely crumbled. A massive countrywide search was launched to find these supposed WMDs. And they found nothing, not a single one. The entire reason for the invasion was, plain and simple, false.
And look, this wasn't just some observation from journalists or outsiders. This was the official final verdict from the U.S. government's own fact-finding mission, the Iraq Survey Group. Their big 2004 report made it crystal clear. There was no WMD program when the invasion happened.
But the story doesn't just end with a false premise. Not even close. That lie set off a horrifying domino effect with disastrous consequences. And maybe the most catastrophic of all was the total collapse of the Iraqi state, which created the perfect storm for a new and terrifying kind of terror group.
So how in the world did that happen? Well, it's a tragic step-by-step process. The US-led coalition in Iraq issued 2 critical orders. First, they dissolved the ruling political party, instantly firing tens of thousands of government workers and hollowing out the entire country's civil service. Then, they disbanded the whole 400,000-strong Iraqi army. Just think about that for a second. You've suddenly created a huge security vacuum, and now you have hundreds of thousands of angry, unemployed men with military training. That power vacuum imploded into a brutal civil war, and out of that chaos, a bunch of former Iraqi officers and insurgents organized and eventually formed the group that the entire world would come to know as ISIS.
But the war didn't just break a single country. It completely shattered the balance of power across the entire Middle East. It fundamentally redrew the region's geopolitical map, and we're still living with those consequences every single day.
And this slide right here gets to the absolute heart of the new Middle East. For decades, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, as brutal as it was, acted as the main wall holding back Iranian influence in the region. By removing him, the United States didn't just topple a dictator, they accidentally knocked down the biggest barrier to Iranian power.
So, with Saddam gone, a new Shia-led government, one that was friendly to Iran, came to power in Baghdad. This basically gave Iran a direct corridor of influence stretching from Iraq through Syria all the way to Lebanon. This huge surge in Iranian power then dramatically ramped up the regional Cold War with Saudi Arabia, fueling all of these proxy conflicts that we still see in the headlines today, from Yemen to Syria.
And the shockwaves didn't stop at the borders of the Middle East. Oh no, the WMD lie rippled outwards, damaging trust between nations, giving America's rivals a huge advantage, and shaking the entire global economy.
You know, in international relations, trust is basically the only currency that matters. And when the truth about the WMDs finally came out, American credibility and moral authority just fell off a cliff. Alliances like NATO were weakened, and the authority of institutions like the United Nations was seriously undermined.
And this diplomatic fallout had some really long-term effects. America's rivals like Russia and China were basically handed a get-out-of-jail-free card. Anytime they were criticized for their own actions, they could just point to Iraq and say, "You're going to lecture us? You lied your way into a war."
And this wasn't just some high-level diplomatic game. This hit people's wallets, hard. All that chaos in Iraq created massive fears about the world's oil supply, and the price per barrel just shot through the roof, over $100. That meant higher gas prices for your car, higher prices at the grocery store. It contributed to financial instability all over the world.
So in the end, it really doesn't matter what language you speak. The story is the same everywhere. A false reason for going to war led to years and years of chaos, and the impact was felt and understood in every single corner of the globe.
And so, our explainer leaves us with this really critical and frankly pretty unsettling question. The Iraq War stands as this giant warning of how bad information, when it's supercharged by politics, can shatter not just nations but entire regions and the global order. It forces all of us to ask, what lessons did we actually learn from all this? And, looking at the world today, how do we know the next war isn't being built on a similar lie?